Welcome to Parenting Teens with Dr. Cam, where we tackle the challenges of raising teenagers without the drama. I'm your host, Dr. Cam. Let's get on with the show. The thought of your teen making a life-altering mistake because of alcohol is terrifying. We know that underage drinking can lead to devastating consequences, from impaired driving accidents to the dangerous combination of alcohol with other drugs. But here's the thing, these tragedies are entirely preventable. To help us navigate these tough topics, I am joined by Stacey D. Stewart, CEO of Mothers Against Drunk Driving, or MADD. Stacey is going to share how we as parents can address these fears, take action, and keep our teens safe from the dangers of drinking and driving. Stacey, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I always love starting with a backstory. So what inspired you to get involved with MADD?
Well, my whole career has kind of been defined by leading and working in organizations that are doing good in society and doing good for others. It's my career has gone everywhere from addressing affordable housing and homelessness to looking at the issues of public education to public health and maternal and infant health. And this opportunity came up to come to MADD, and I just thought it was an amazing opportunity. The organization has, an incredible legacy, has done really phenomenal things, and is on a journey to continue to address the issue of ending impaired driving. And I just jumped on the opportunity to come once it came my way, and I've been excited to be a part of the organization ever since.
I love that. Thank you for everything you're doing. That's amazing. Making some serious change in the world. That's incredible. Tell me a little bit about what is the goal of MADD right now? Like what are your main things that you're trying to accomplish?
So the main goal is to end impaired driving,
Mm.
meaning ending drunk and drug driving. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, I think maybe because of some of the success that Matt has had over almost 45 years, a lot of people think that that issue has gone away or we've dealt with it. Some
Mhm.
people say, "Oh, well, we have rideshare, we have Uber, and rideshare alternatives. So why would anyone get behind the wheel and drive?" And unfortunately, it still happens. In fact, based on the latest statistics, over 13,000 people died as a result of impaired driving crashes.
Mhm.
And about almost every 90 seconds, someone is either being injured or killed in an impaired driving crash. And so we still have a major issue in this country. And in fact, even though we have seen a 50% decline in fatalities from the beginning of MADD's getting started until just before the pandemic, during the pandemic, we saw an upswing. So from 2019 to 2022, we saw an increase in fatalities of over 30%.
Yeah.
So we began going in the wrong direction. And that's why at MADD, we're, you know, very, very focused on doubling down to make sure that we build awareness around the dangers of drinking and using substances behind the wheel. We also are making sure that young people understand the dangers of underage drinking, because we know that underage drinking and substance use can lead to a greater chance of becoming involved in an impaired driving crash. So these are just really important issues that we have to continue to focus on, and we can't let up the focus because, frankly, if we do, more people die or get injured, and none of us wants that.
Yeah, I think as parents, we're very well aware of this, right? And when our kids are going out and they're even before they're driving and their friends are driving, we're already terrified enough, right? I think our kids also know, but there's a disconnect between what they know and what they do, and there's also a disconnect of what we know and what our kids will hear from us, right? And
Yes.
what they
Yeah.
believe from us. So I think that's the biggest thing as parents that we're worried about is how do we convey the severity of it without terrifying them, but also how do we do it in a way where we're teaching them to make good decisions even when there's peer pressure and they don't want to be
Yeah.
the weird person that says, no, I'm not going to take the ride, or no, I'm not
Right.
drinking. I
No,
throw a
it's
lot
it.
at you because there's a
Yeah,
lot.
no, no, no. But you're asking all the right questions and touching on all the right issues. And I think, at MAD, one of the things that we do is provide a lot of information and resources to parents so that parents know how to talk to their kids around the dangers of underage drinking and substance use, and then what that can mean in terms of becoming involved in an impaired driving crash. And I think it's really important to level set. You know, there are about 4,300 deaths attributed each year to underage drinking in this country. And when you look at, in fact, based on data as of 2021, about 27% of drivers between the ages of 15 and 20
Wow.
were killed in traffic
Mm,
crashes, and had alcohol present in their system. And
yeah.
so it's really important to understand that, you know, these are really serious issues, and that if we don't talk to our kids as soon as, you know, we're ready to have that conversation and they're ready to have the conversation, which can be as early as even elementary school, middle school, but certainly by high school,
Yeah.
we could be doing our kids a disservice, because if they're not engaged in a very positive conversation with their parents, who we know parents are the most influential
Yeah.
adults in a kid's life, they may be being influenced by some of the wrong things. To your point around peer pressure, becomes very intense the older that young people get, certainly through high school, middle school, and high school, and into college. And so, creating those healthy habits is something that's really important. And that's why we created the Power Parents Handbook, which is available at MADD.org, our website. It's available to give parents those tools that they need to know how to talk to kids in healthy and positive ways, so that kids understand how to make good decisions, and how to make sure that they stay as safe as possible and keep others safe as well.
Yeah, I looked through that. It's beautifully done too. It's really, really cool resource. So I will put the link there and I encourage parents to look at that. Let's pull out a few things. Let's say we've got a tween now, right? So they're not driving yet. Hopefully, well, chances are now they might be starting to be introduced to alcohol. How do we start that conversation at that age? What are some things parents can say or do to really build that so that we can build upon that as they get older?
So I think one of the things that the handbook tries to point out is that it's not even what we say, it's also how we say it.
Mm,
So there are certain kinds of parenting styles and approaches that tend to get young people listening and hearing the message that we have to convey,
yeah.
right? You know, some parents, and this is no judgment on parents at all, because, you know, we're all just human beings and
Mhm.
we're all just trying to do our best, right?
Yeah.
Um, but sometimes that more authoritarian style of like, do what I say, and sort of, you know, pound the message into the kid and hope they,
Yeah.
you know, it just kind of seeps into their brain or gets pounded into the brain, may work for some kids, but for a lot of kids, it's not proven to be always effective.
Yeah.
Or the kind of laissez faire, you know, oh, they'll get it, oh, it'll be fine, and trying to taking it for granted that things will just be okay and I don't really need to be proactive, is also probably not the right approach. So
Yeah.
the right approach is, you know, I mean, I think every parent kind of knows when their kid might be coming into situations where they might be introduced to alcohol or substances. Certainly by middle school and high school, it's really
Mhm.
important to kind of sit down with your kids and with a very positive approach, you know, really in a way that's assuming that you trust your young people to make good judgments. They are, you know, smart. They are growing, you know, young people, and want to be independent at the same time. It's really important for parents to understand there is a role for you to be able to say, to help young people understand that substances, and alcohol is a substance,
Yeah.
can be dangerous, and to explain how those things can be dangerous, how those things can impair one's judgment, how they can impair your response time, and how it's okay when a lot of other kids are doing certain activities. It's really okay to make a choice to say not, or to call for help, or to reach out for help when you feel like you're in a situation where you may not be able to, you know, get home safely, or you may be forced to make a decision that you don't want to.
Yeah.
It's keeping the communication lines open, making sure that kids and young people know it's really okay to come to the parent, even if you think you've made a mistake, even if you think that you're doing something that could be dangerous down the road, never hesitating to bring that forward. So making sure that those lines of communication are always open. I always am amazed at how parents sometimes will make the decision, well, I have a bunch of kids over. I'm okay if they all drink when I'm here because
Yeah.
I'm looking out over them. Um, but I just don't want kids going out and drinking. Well, if kids are at your house, then someone else's kid is out drinking at
Yeah.
your house.
Yeah.
and and the issue for a lot of young people is once they leave the house and they're engaged in some behavior that could be very dangerous for them, how do we make sure that they get home safely?
Yeah.
And even though we know that kids are not supposed to be drinking and using substances under the age of 21, they still do,
Oh, yes,
and
they
it still
do.
happens. And it's our responsibility as parents to make
Yeah.
sure that not only our kids, but other people's kids are safe too. And we have that responsibility to ourselves and to others.
That is so true, and it's such a good point that we're like, "Well, we're keeping them safe," but you're right. I'm not trusting somebody else to keep my kids safe, so I
Yeah.
don't want they don't need to trust me either. And I think
Right.
it sends a mixed message too, going, "Oh, it's okay to drink now, but not here." And
Right.
so that's confusing. So let's say we've got, and I see this a lot in my practice. We've got kids that are using substances. They're either drinking or they're smoking. Um, they are doing their very best to hide it from their parents because they know their
Hmm.
parents don't want them to, and their parents have told them not to do it. But it doesn't change them. It doesn't make them not do it, right? In fact, it just
Yeah.
makes them very sneaky about doing it.
Right.
And so then they make choices. So what do we do if we're in this situation and we find out that our child has been hiding that they've been drinking or doing substances? How do we respond to that when they clearly don't have trust in us enough to tell us?
Yeah. Well, those are tough and those happen all the time. And,
Mhm.
and those are situations that so many of us have found ourselves in where we have to confront a young person about their behavior. And, I think this is one of the things that's really important is this conversation isn't just a one-time thing. It's something that should be done, continuously and continuously using opportunities to engage in those conversations. Sometimes it's helpful if you are aware that your young person might be using substances or may be involved in some behavior, is just to go back to those reminders of what we talked about and how this could be dangerous, and just continuing to reinforce those messages. Continue to reinforce that this isn't about punishment necessarily. Although sometimes that may be appropriate given the situation, and that's for every parent to decide how they want to do that. But I do think it's really important to make sure that young people don't feel like there's some sort of punitive consequence necessarily if they just have made a mistake. However, at the same time, they do need to understand that even one mistake can lead to a life
Yeah.
altering consequence, either for them or for someone else. So there's a real balance between, look, I understand, you may make a mistake here, something may have happened, but please bring them back to remember what your options are. Remember that you don't have to do this. Remember that, and this is another important point, is that I think it's really important to understand that some kids are using substances or alcohol because of, peer pressure and things like that. Some kids are really dealing with actual legitimate mental health issues. And a
Yes.
lot of young people are looking for ways
Yes.
to cope with those things. And I think it's really important to remind parents that if your kid is involved in using substance for whatever reason, make sure that you're getting them other kinds of help that they may need. That it's really okay to go to a therapist to talk things out, or to have a coach. We just introduced a program called MADD Sports because not only are parents really influential in young people's lives, but there are other adults that really young people look up to. And it may be engaging those other adults in that kid's life who will be influential, a teacher, a principal, someone that a young person, respects, and really engage them and ask them for help. Some parents maybe feel uncomfortable asking for help or asking for assistance, but as your kid gets older, your young person gets older, they are looking at other adults in their life. They do have mentors. They are other people that they really look up to. And it's really important. There's this phrase, it takes a village. It's really important to engage all those trusted, could be a member of the clergy. It
Yeah.
just depends. Could be an older family member, even that, an aunt or an uncle or a cousin who can sit them down and talk to them and get to them in ways that maybe as a parent you can't.
Yeah.
And that's really okay. Use all your resources. And those would be just some of the things. So I do think continuing the conversation over time and bringing them back to remember some of these situations, making sure you're meeting your young person where they are, right?
Yeah.
Is really important.
That is key, and while you're talking, I'm kind of, like, developing this plan or idea in my head that I wanna run by you to see if this would work. Because I wanna give parents something really tangible here. So from what I'm hearing, if we're catching and we find out our kids are drinking, probably the not great way to address it is to, like, get harder, n batten down the hatches, restrict them from everything, and just really get into that authoritarian, "You can't do this" mode. Because when we do this, we're not addressing why they're doing it, and
Right,
we're disconnecting from them even more, which means our influence is deteriorating even more.
right, right.
Instead, what I'm hearing is, let's go find somebody that they already trust, a coach,
Hmm.
a teacher, a mentor, and talk to them and say, "Hey, I've heard this. Is there any, can you have a conversation with them?" Then in the meantime, we step back and we start building our connection with them rather than breaking it more. I think
Absolutely.
with fear, we get this idea that we've got to do something right now. But
Yeah,
when we get in that mindset, we make it worse. Do
yeah.
you agree with that?
Yeah, and I would definitely say even if you find other adults, again, our research shows that it's still parents who are the most
Mhm.
influential. So it is a both and to your point. I
Yeah,
think it's the parents really sitting down with the kids and trying to, build on that ability to have that open conversation. Some parents have different ways of doing it. Some parents talk about the challenges they've had in life and how they have confronted some of the same things and how they had to deal with it or how they reached out. And to your point, and the point we were just talking about, and finding potentially other adults who can help reinforce those messages. But having that positive, open conversation that says, look, even if you're dealing with some things, there's nothing that's ever too big that you can't come to me, you can't come to somebody else, and we can get you the help you need. And just reminding young people the consequences of all of their actions and decisions. We've talked to so many young people who, have regretted if they've been involved with a crash or they've injured someone or even killed someone.
yeah,
And they have to live with the pain of that over many, many years, not to mention the pain that that family that's lost a loved one or had a loved one be injured or have some life altering, outcome, what they're having to deal with,
yeah,
which is devastating. And so, I think, again, we can't take it for granted. The other thing I would say just quickly is that I think a lot of young people do not understand. While MAD started as really primarily focused on alcohol, what we're seeing is a growing trend around what's called polyuse, the combination of alcohol and substances. So, with legalization of cannabis and commercialization of marijuana, it's really, really important. There are a lot of young people, based on some of the surveys we've done, who really take it for granted that
mhm,
you can be high and drive and it's okay. Some
yeah,
young people actually believe it helps you drive, that
yeah,
it makes you a better driver. And that just simply isn't true. If you're impaired in any way, whether it's due to alcohol, substances, or could even be prescription drugs, you have to be very careful about it.
yeah,
If you're impaired in any way, it really is important that you step back and make sure that young people understand that if they're impaired, they should not be driving, that it's
right.
okay to leave the car where it is, take an Uber, call me, call a friend, but don't decide to do something that could be, result in something that's very serious.
Stacey, what you were just saying too, I wanna highlight because I think this is really important, is that you're finding a plan ahead of time. Because if we're expecting our teen to be in a state and then think logically about what the next safe thing to do and how to
Yeah,
get out of that situation, they're not going to.
right.
So if you've got a plan ahead of time, rather than saying just don't do it, we're gonna say we don't want you to do it. We're gonna be clear about that. But if you find yourself in a situation, even if you're not drinking but your friend is, what can you do in that
Yeah,
situation? Let's get the plan in place and let's talk about that plan over and over so it becomes really easy, because our goal is to keep them safe,
yes,
right? What do
yeah,
you think is a good plan to do set up with our teen?
yeah. Well, I think, obviously, if your teen is going out to a party or going to a friend's house, and if you can afford it and if it's available to you, taking rideshare to the destination and making a plan to take it back is always a good idea. And if you feel like your teen, you know, might find themselves in a situation where you think they'll be okay, but you're not quite sure, have a conversation and say, look, um, just if just to be extra safe, why don't we go ahead and make a plan in advance? Or
Yeah.
as a parent or adult, let me take you and pick you up. Now, a lot of teens don't want that. They don't want their parents around anything. So
I'm gonna
rideshare
come
can
in
be,
and get you.
yeah. Or make a plan to have, the older sister or brother or
Yeah.
someone who they are not uncomfortable with, make that plan. I think sometimes coordinating with other parents on how maybe a group of them will make transportation plans is always really helpful. Some teens, may feel like this is a little intrusive, um, but I do think it's going to this place of reminding your kids, look, I care about you and I love you,
Yeah.
and I just want to make sure you're safe, and I want to make sure that other people are safe. I have had many of those conversations with my own children, who are now um, 19 and 21. And so I've been through many years
Mhm.
of dealing with some of these situations. And, I think what our Power Parents information tries to give you is just that it's really important to make sure that you are responding to what your kids are feeling, that you're listening to what your kids are experiencing,
Mhm.
and maybe your kids will have a plan that they would like to offer of how they plan to get around safely. That's always a really good option so
Yeah.
that you're building their confidence and their ability to use good judgment. To your point, once they're impaired, it's really hard to make good judgments. That's for anybody, especially true for a young person. So the best thing is to not leave it to a debate or a default or an unknown. Go
Yeah.
ahead and make a plan in advance. We have a partnership with Uber and Anheuser-Busch called Decide to Ride. It's really geared for more adults, but
Mhm.
the theory is still the same. It's if you're going to a football game, make a decision on how you're going to get there and get home
Mhm.
safely
Yeah.
so that you're not putting yourself at risk or others. The same is true, as your kids start to, go through teen years and are becoming more active socially and certainly into college as well.
There's 2 points that came to mind while you were talking, and this is so helpful just to hear it from somebody that's, like, knows all the data and knows all the facts, right? But I think the one thing is some parents will say, "Well, if I say, 'Hey, here's what we're gonna do when you're drinking,' I'm condoning drinking." Um, what I've seen is that when we actually are saying that, our kids are less likely to drink because we've taken all the fun out of the sneaking behind. Teens have actually told me this. It's like when my parents understand and help me through it, it's no longer that desire. It's not as fun to do.
Yeah.
And the other one is to have them involved in the decision and the plan, because if we just dictate a plan and it doesn't address their needs, like, I'm gonna be embarrassed if I do that, or they're not gonna do it. But if
Yes.
we involve them and we address what they need, it's much more likely that they're gonna follow through.
I think parents too, again, I want to underscore this point because there was a recent survey that just came out showing that there is a decline in alcohol use among young people. But in some ways, it's being replaced by other things.
Yes.
Again, being replaced by substances, being replaced by social media and other kinds of things that young people are using to
Yeah,
deal with some of the normal stresses, anxieties, worries, fears they have in life, right?
yeah,
And again, I think it goes back to that point of, um, you know, they, our young people are dealing with a lot. Even through the pandemic, I think we kind of take it for granted the kind of emotional and mental impact that had on everybody, but especially on young people. And a lot of young people are still dealing with the aftermath of that. It's not, these are very serious issues. So I think we have to just remind ourselves that our kids are still pretty delicate, in terms of their physical development, their emotional, mental, social, emotional development. All of that is very, um, still at a very delicate stage if they're in middle school, high school, and especially. And so it's really important to be mindful of that. The last thing I just want to say about this too is that, and a lot of parents sometimes don't want to hear this, but I think it's important to say that because parents are so influential, again, it goes back to this point of is sometimes it's don't listen to my words, just watch what I do.
mm,
and we
Yeah.
are sometimes modeling the behavior that our kids pick up on. I
Yeah.
was just recently with a friend of mine and stayed at her house for a few days, and she said, I really regret the amount of social activity and coming home after work and the drinks and the wine and all of those things almost on a regular basis. What messages that was sending my
Mm.
own children
Yeah.
about the use of alcohol in the house. And I think we have to just be mindful. Of course, at MADD, we're never telling people not to enjoy yourself. And, as an adult, you make decisions that you want to make, and you should.
Yeah.
At the same time, as parents, we have another role, which is that we influence our kids. And if you want your kids to be influenced in the best and most positive ways, not just don't be mindful just of what you say, but what you do.
Yeah.
And I think that becomes a very powerful message as parents of how we communicate and help our kids to be as healthy and as strong and able to make the best decisions possible as they grow older into adulthood.
Yeah, that's incredibly powerful. And I think when you're talking about how teens use substances a lot of times to deal with their mental health issues, right? To feel better. So do adults. So when we're showing our kids that we turn to substances and alcohol to make us feel better, we're showing them that that's how they make themselves feel better. And I think we don't see ourselves when we do this as innately bad because we're drinking. So we need to avoid seeing our kids as being bad for
Hmm.
drinking and rather going, why are they turning towards to this as a solution? And how do we together find a more healthy, safer solution?
Right. And what's the balance, right? I mean, no
Yeah,
one's saying that, drinking, having a drink every once in a while or isn't okay,
right.
or any other illegal substance. It may not be okay every once in a while. It's more, if it's on a regular basis, if it's a regular thing in the household, what what kind of message is that sending, to your point, and how could that be influencing them to make similar kinds of decisions in the future that actually could be dangerous, prove to be dangerous down the road.
Yeah. It's about using it as a coping tool rather
Hmm.
than having a healthy relationship with it,
Yeah,
right?
I think
Okay.
that's right.
So, Stacey, what is one thing that you really want parents to take away from this conversation?
Well, I think the most important thing is parents are the most influential
Mm.
adults in
Yeah.
their children's life, and that there's a very important role that parents play to influence the behavior, the decisions, the way that your children grow and develop. Parents think about that in any number of ways. Parents get tutors for their kids to do well in school.
Right.
They involve their kids in all kinds of after school activities because they want other kinds of ways to enrich and develop their children. The kinds of things that parents, and I'm of a generation where issues around mental health and talking about delicate issues in the household weren't things that parents did a lot of,
Mm-mm.
right? So I had to bear the brunt of not having some of the benefit of some of the resources that we're offering to parents right
Right.
now. But I think it is a reminder that as parents, it is important to have those what might be seen or thought of as somewhat difficult conversations.
Mhm.
That they're What's even more difficult is if you don't have the conversation and that leads your child to make some poor decisions in their life that could then hurt them or others. That's an even tougher situation.
Yeah, it
So,
is.
and conversation. So, the most important thing is make sure that you're proactively working with your young person to listen to them, to develop that positive parenting
Mhm.
relationship with them, to make sure that you keep those open lines of communication, to make sure that you're modeling the best behavior, to make sure that you understand that drinking and drugged driving is still a major issue in this country. And unfortunately, it's affecting far too many young people, some of them even before they're even legally allowed to drink or use drugs.
Yeah.
Therefore, getting to your young person as early as possible with these healthy conversations is really important, and that's what MAD is focused on to try to prevent impaired driving in the future, now and in the future. So leverage our tools at madd.org. Power Parents program is an evidence-based program. It's been peer-reviewed. It's been studied. It is proven to work to help kids make better decisions and keep our roads safer. So that's the most important thing.
That is fantastic. I will link again to that, and I do really encourage people to look at it as a great, great resource. And thank you guys for providing that. I think that's really helpful. So, Stacey, thank you so much for
Thank
jumping on
you. Oh,
and
it's so
sharing
great to
with us.
see you.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Absolutely. Great to see you. Thank you for having me.
Sure. And that's a wrap. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Parenting Teens with Dr. Cam. Don't forget to hit follow so you don't miss a single episode, and share the love by passing this on to a friend. Until next time, keep making a positive impact in your teen's life.